Every fortune in this series ends in a ledger. This one begins with a single piece of paper. 1888. A licensing agreement, a few pages long, with one clause that matters, $2.50 for every horsepower of alternating current electricity sold in America. Forever. Look around the room you're in. Count the things that are plugged in, the lights, the screen you're watching, the charger by the bed. That clause covers every one of them. Run it forward across the electric century, and it becomes, on paper, the most valuable contract a human being has ever signed. It no longer exists, and the man it belonged to died alone in a hotel room, his rent paid by another man's pity. This is the story of what happened to that piece of paper. There is no document for the beginning. That is the point of the beginning. He owned nothing but the idea. Nikola Tesla was born in 1856, in a village on the military frontier of the Austrian Empire, the son of a Serbian priest. The family said he arrived at midnight, in the middle of a lightning storm. It's a legend. He kept it. He understood, better than anyone alive, that a story is also a kind of machine. The idea came to him, as he told it, in a park in Budapest, at sunset, in 1882. A motor with no brushes and no sparks, driven by a current that reverses itself many times a second. A field of force, spinning in space. He said he saw it whole, and sketched it in the dust of the path with a stick. 2 years later, he walked off a ship in New York with, as he told it for the rest of his life, 4 cents in his pocket, and went to work for the most famous inventor on Earth. It lasted 6 months. There is a story he told about that too, a promised $50,000 for redesigning Edison's dynamos, and when he asked for it, a laugh, "You don't understand our American humor." Whatever was actually said, he quit. And then the man carrying the 20th century around in his head spent a winter digging ditches. $2 a day. He would remember the foreman's pity for the rest of his life. The first document arrives in 1888. In May of that year, Tesla stood in front of the American Institute of Electrical Engineers and showed them the motor from the park in Budapest, running. By morning, he was the most talked-about engineer in America, and one industrialist was listening carefully, George Westinghouse of Pittsburgh, the one man betting his entire company on alternating current. The deal, as it has come down to us, $60,000 in cash and stock, a salary to consult in Pittsburgh, and the clause, $2.50 for every horsepower his patents produced. Not a sale, a royalty. A meter bolted to the future itself. It needed defending. Thomas Edison had wired his empire for direct current, and he did not intend to lose it politely. What followed was one of the ugliest campaigns in the history of American business. Dogs and horses electrocuted for reporters to teach the public that the rival current was the killer's current. When New York State built the first electric chair, it was wired deliberately with Westinghouse machines. They wanted a new verb in the language, Westinghoused. The answer came in Chicago in 1893. The World's Fair, lit end to end by the Tesla system, hundreds of thousands of lamps burning at once, the first electric city any human being had ever seen. 27 million people walked through it. The war was over. And somewhere in a Pittsburgh ledger, a clause was quietly counting horsepower. The arrears alone were already a fortune. The second document is the one that isn't there. 1891. A banking panic reaches across the Atlantic, credit tightens like a fist, and Westinghouse Electric, overbuilt, overextended, at war with Edison on every front, is suddenly weeks from going under. The bankers who can save it name their condition, and it is not negotiable. The royalty goes, or the company does. So George Westinghouse rode to New York to tell Tesla himself. Here the record splits in two. The legend, told by his first biographer, and retold for 80 years, is that Tesla listened, asked whether Westinghouse had believed in him when no one else would, took the contract from the desk, and tore it in half. The ledger tells it colder, a negotiated release, and some years later a check, $216,000, for the patents outright. The exact terms have never been firmly established. Believe whichever version you like. The outcome is identical. He let go of the largest royalty ever written to save the one man who had bet on him, and the meter on the 20th century kept running, for everyone but him. 2 years later, his system took Niagara Falls. The generators turned, Buffalo lit up in the night, and the age of electric power began in earnest. his field of force spinning in every machine. His share of it, nothing. The third document is a mortgage. What money Tesla did have, he spent the only way he ever spent it, on the next future. In Colorado Springs, he built a laboratory that threw man-made lightning 100 feet across the room and filled notebooks with the physics of the Earth itself as a conductor. Then he came back east to build the big one, Wardenclyffe, a tower on Long Island financed with $150,000 of John Pierpont Morgan's money to send messages across the ocean without wires and, in Tesla's real plan, the part he saved for later, power. Electricity itself through the Earth to anyone with a receiver. Then Marconi crossed the Atlantic first, with equipment a fraction as ambitious and a fraction the cost. And Morgan, looking at a tower whose product no meter could measure, declined to send another dollar. History attached a line to that refusal. If anyone can draw the power, where do we put the meter? There is no record he ever said it. He didn't need to. The arithmetic said it for him. The money died. The tower stood on the Long Island shore for a decade, unfinished, while its inventor's bills piled up at the Waldorf Astoria. And the endings write themselves from here. To settle the hotel debt, Tesla signed the deed to Wardenclyffe over to the Waldorf's proprietor. In 1917, the new owners dynamited the tower and sold it for scrap. The machine meant to electrify the Earth went to settle a hotel invoice. That same year, the engineering establishment gave Tesla its highest honor. They called it the Edison Medal. The fourth document is a rent ledger, and the strangest act of the story. A procession of Manhattan hotels, each a little cheaper than the last. An old man, still immaculate, feeding the pigeons outside the public library every day at the same hour. There was one, a white one, he nursed in his own room when she was hurt. He told his biographer he had loved her as a man loves a woman. Once a year, on his birthday, reporters climbed up to his suite, and he sold them tomorrow, beams of force, messages from other worlds, and the papers ran the eccentric alongside the genius and called it a story. Then, in 1934, the quietest entry in the whole ledger. The Westinghouse Corporation, the company his surrendered clause had saved, began paying Nikola Tesla $125 a month, plus his rent at the Hotel New Yorker. They called it a consulting fee. It was charity, dressed carefully, so the proudest man in New York would never have to hear the word. The royalty had come back to him as pity. On the 7th of January, 1943, a maid ignored the Do Not Disturb card that had hung on the door of room 3327 for 2 days and found him, 86 years old. Within days, government men had sealed his trunks and carried off his papers, hunting a weapon that was never there. Their own expert read it all and found speculation, not a weapon. Even his ghost was audited. So closed the ledger. Historians who have run the arithmetic on that clause, $2.50 on every horsepower across the century that electrified the world, come out in the billions. First billionaire territory. Every version of the sum is larger than any fortune in this series. But here is what the arithmetic misses. Every other man in this catalogue held on. They clutched their fortunes to the end, and the fortunes buried them. Tesla opened his hand, and his is the only fortune in the catalogue still paying out, not to an estate. To you, turn off the lights in this room and count what keeps humming in the dark. Every one of those is the receipt. The fortune was never lost. It was uncollected. Somewhere back in the brightest frame of this story, at the very summit of his triumph, an old friend of his poorest years is already waiting. Find her and put the timestamp in the comments. And if these stories of fortunes made and lost are worth your time, subscribe. This is Rags to Riches.